You know, snakes can be great examples of this. They have to shed their skin, otherwise the old skin will just suffocate and kill them. And I don't know very much about, snakes or the process of shedding the skin. What little I know is that it is immensely painful. I mean, they kind of just get suffocated, and it generates a lot of heat, you know. And I think human beings are very much the same way. You really have to feel suffocated. You know, there are two ways you can kind of make this change happen. The desire needs to be either so intense inside you that it just happens for you without having any external sources. You don't need a teacher. You don't need books. You don't need workshops. There is enough intensity inside you that change will eventually take place. Most of us are not that fortunate, you know. Someone needs to look at you, see how you feel about yourself, and say, okay, I'm willing to kind of help this person transition, shed the skin. But it's not going to be easy. It took Mohammad about 20 years of going into the caves. It took Jesus about 18 years of being in the desert. It took Moses about 40 years, from what little, the book says. What you have in all these scenarios is that people wanted to know something. In order for them to know that something, they had to get rid of a lot of baggage. Getting rid of the baggage is difficult. When I first moved into this house, there was nothing in it. And so when you talked, when you spoke in the room, everything echoed, And since I sing, it was such a nice feeling of walking. There are no rugs, no sofas, nothing. You say, you sing, and there is this kind of echo in the entire place, and you like it. And then the sofa comes in, and then the rugs come in, and then the tables come in. And then you go, you're waiting for the echo, and there is nothing. And after a while you say, well, maybe I should just go out there and buy a machine, a microphone, an amplifier. There is also this let me kind of approach your question in a different way. You're married. It's a good marriage, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. You guys live in a nice place. And the promise you made your husband and your wife in the church, you want to hold true to that promise, which is, I'll take care of you. If you get sick, I'll be here. But if you die, I can't come on that journey. You just have to wait until I die. Okay? But until that last breath, I'll be there. You don't want to die to anything in your life. Your life is good. The idea of dying to your life doesn't even enter your mind, because it is relatively comfortable and peaceful. And it gives you meaning and relevance to some extent. And forget the hiccups that all of us have once in a while. And let's say where you work, you have a colleague, and he or she happens to be physically attractive, emotionally attractive, intellectually attractive. And it's like anything else in life. It begins with a crack, one single crack, then that crack branches out, and all of a sudden you have all these 10, 15, 20 cracks. And all these cracks, what they have in common is that they kind of poison you. Poison in the sense that they push you towards this new person, your colleague. And as time goes on, you have more feelings for them, and now you're building history with them. And as you build more momentum with this person, you lose momentum with your family. Okay? And I think this is the best way to answer your question, because the conflicts, the guilt, the shame, you can feel, they're very tactile. I don't want to talk about this stuff in an abstract way because it doesn't do anyone any good, especially in a culture where, everybody's telling us that change is easy, just focus, be positive, and in a week's time, you'll get there. That's the promised land. And I don't think that's true at all. And I think, in some ways, Marx was right. These ideas have a tendency of making you passive. You kind of lose touch with reality. Your life becomes this bubble, this fantasy, and there's nothing good about it. You really do begin to hate yourself for allowing yourself to slowly have feelings for this colleague of yours. You're not completely dead to your family life, but 20% of you has died to your family. I mean, that's a big chunk of you no longer participating, But the 80% masks the 20%. Once in a while, your companion catches you, where he or she sees you perhaps, I don't know, going on walks by yourself now, texting more often, being on the phone more often. I mean, these are all signs, and if you have a relatively mature companion, they'll just look the other way. But they know, You could kind of just go to your dean and say, I want to change offices. I just don't like the way this guy smells. I don't like the way he talks. I just don't like anything about this. I mean, you have to lie to the dean. You just have to create some story so that they could justify your move. But for the first time, you don't come to life through your eyes. You don't come to life through your nose, through your ears. There is something else that's taking place inside you. You feel alive. You don't know why. When it's time for you to go to school at like 10 and your colleague comes at 10:30, So you kind of get stuck in purgatory. At 10 o'clock you end up in paradise. 10:15 you end up in hell. And 10:20 it's purgatory. And then you hear the keys. And now it's hell, because you don't know what to do when your colleague walks in. You try to contain yourself, but it's not that easy. You do the best you can, but all of a sudden he or she looks at you and says, "Hi, how was your weekend?" And you have been waiting for that opening all weekend, and it comes to you. And after a couple of weeks, it's no longer at 20%. You're now in this game with your colleague about 50%. You know how it feels to only be 50% in your relationship. It's still very good. Because when you kind of understand the structure of any relationship, none of us are there. We are there for perhaps breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, somewhere in between. But we are all profoundly ambitious. You know, you may live in the same house, but it's just hello and goodbye for the most part. And there is, again, nothing wrong with this, because it's nice where you have the privilege and the comfortability of knowing that someone is okay with you saying, hello, I'm not going to go for a walk and I'll be back in 10 hours. Fine, honey, have a good time. I'll see you when you come back. I'll make food. It's great, you know. As more of you becomes entangled with your colleague, there is this intense desire inside you where you just don't want to be in your family life anymore. You know, I mean, some people have romance with themselves, a good part of themselves. And some people have romance with people on the outside. If you have romance with people on the outside, it's not going to go very far. You know, if you have romance with yourself, then the story becomes very, very different. I mean, that's the story of Narcia, where you really want to figure out who you are, what you are, and you become narcissistic. You're profoundly self-involved. You know, you become perhaps the most selfish person on the planet. And it's good. But everywhere you go, what people reflect back to you don't like. I don't like to be called a professor. I don't like to be called a man or a woman. I don't like to be called a husband or a wife. I want something that, you know, kind of like the third commandment. Don't speak, don't utter Yahweh, because it's beyond language, it's beyond images. I am looking for something within me that is beyond concept, beyond language, beyond images. You know, that's a good romance to be in. There comes a point where you are 99.9% with your colleague, and there is so little of you in your family life. You've packed up, you're about to leave. You know, you are dead in the relationship. You are but a corpse. Your husband sees that, your wife sees that, your kids. I mean, it's sad they see you, that you're just not there. And you're about to take, you know, your body out the door. And your child says, Mom, are you leaving? Dad, are you leaving? It's not going to be a clean walking away. It never is. You know what you want, which is your colleague. But all of a sudden, you know, a tiny little voice reminds you of who you are, which is a mom. I don't know what needs to happen to you, you know, where you kind of look at your child and you say, I'm sorry. You look at your husband, your wife, and you say, I'm sorry. And you don't take anything with you except a couple of, some clothes, and that's it, and your car. You leave the rest of the stuff for your family. It's such a huge sacrifice and such a huge shift in perspective and purpose and meaning. It's horrifying. The problem with the scenario, Cassie, is that you have no idea what you're walking into. The assumption is this new relationship, it's going to have an eternal shelf life. It's never going to grow old. It's always going to be glazy, shiny, And that propels you, that fantasy. And then there are days you sit and you walked away from your family. You're dead to that. You've come to realize perhaps that, just having a family is no good. Having a house is no good. Paying mortgage is no good. Teaching is no good. None of those things are any good. So you walk away. You say, okay, I'm going to get a van, drive to Yosemite. That's where I'm going to live. By the time you get to this place, you don't want to just have casual conversations with anybody. You don't want anyone to look at you. You don't want anyone to talk to you. They have nothing to say to you. You lived in the city. You know what people talk about. You know who goes to Yosemite. People go to Yosemite because they're on vacation. They hate the city life, or maybe they just have 2 weeks off. They love nature, so they're over there. But whatever they say in those 2 weeks, it means nothing. They're not committed to the forest. They're just taking 2 weeks off. That's all that they have done. And now they can sit and talk about the environment for like 5 hours. It means nothing. Now that you have died to your family, the next step is, okay, you can't be without a relationship. It's impossible. I'm not talking about the relationship with a man or a woman. You need to be in a relationship with a certain set of ideas or emotions. Forget people. And you've come to a place where you say, I don't want to watch TV. I want to be the creator of ideas, of emotions. Because that's what you want to do. You want to be a spokesperson for yourself. But you have to figure out, where you need to go to find this other part of you. Where do you go? How long can you take the loneliness? How long can you live with the frustration, the fear, the doubt? I don't know if the story is true, but in a couple of places in the Islamic tradition, they have said that Mohammad wanted to just end his life a few times. You have a vision, it's a great experience. For the first time, you realize that you're not crazy. That all these 20 years where you have kind of gone into the cave and sat quietly, the result of your labor is that this archangel is now speaking to you. And Muhammad is not like Eckhart Tolle or Sadhguru or any of these New Age teachers. He is a really, really honest person. And what happens in honesty is you say, that can't be. Maybe it was just a dream. Maybe it never happened to me. So he goes to his wife because he wants to know if what he experienced was in fact true. His wife takes him to a Christian monk, and he doesn't have an experience for the next 2 years. And in those 2 years, of complete emptiness, he says, well, if I had an experience 2 years ago, why can't I have it next week or the following week or the following month? Maybe none of this was real. The problem is you can't go back to your life, the one that you had. And you can't touch and summon the thing you experienced. You have lost both worlds. You begin to doubt. And it's not like you can easily just walk back to your life and say, oh, honey, I'm sorry, I think I was just going a little crazy, but now, I am sober. I'm very clear. I want you and my family back. It's like the ridiculous Kanye West. I want my family back. And it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's an avalanche. You know what happens when you die? And I borrow from one of my friends who's been dead for a long, long time, Epicurus. The father of the person who said you should pursue pleasure. But he didn't mean like drinking and smoking and just being an idiot. Whatever pleasure you seek in life, make sure the consequences doesn't destroy you. You need philosophy for that. You need thinking and reflection for that. And Epicurus himself was a profoundly modest man. He didn't eat much. He had a couple of robes. He had a few students. It was a very, very modest life. Modesty is the most profound pleasure you could ever have in life. That's basically the core of his philosophy. He had argued that there is no reason to fear death. And the reason is you no longer exist. We don't think. We don't feel. You're at complete rest, if you can even feel rest when you're dead. So when you say die before you are dead, well, what do you do before you die? I mean, look at us. You wake up every morning, attend to your family. Then you go to work. Then you call your parents. Then you write. Then you read. Then you work. Then your children. Then your husband and wife. Then your in-laws and outlaws. Then your friends. Then the traffic. From the moment you wake up until the time you go to bed, it's hustle and bustle. There is no rest. I'm not talking about these ridiculous people going to a yoga shop, sitting, closing their eyes, inhaling, exhaling for an hour, coming out saying, oh yes, I'm at peace. Dying before you're dead means you have reached a stage where nothing touches you. You don't feel anything. What can a dead person feel? Nothing. I'm not talking about being depressed. It may contain elements of depression, but it's an emotion you can work with and it inspires you. It's like many of the writers who can't write unless they're just sad. I think some of us, not all of us, Some of us desire to die before we are dead. Some of us begin to kind of write about it and think about it and feel about it. But very rarely do people actually say, okay, I'm actually going to walk that path. The snake doesn't just lay around and the skin just kind of gets off of it. It has to slid underground, It kind of crawls, and in some ways it has to force this old skin to be removed. To walk this particular statement, to kind of make it into something very practical, in other words, to make change possible, first you need to have great stamina for pain, great stamina for confusion, for doubt. And you have to endure patiently. And you won't see any results for a long, 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 long time. I don't know what the end result is. I don't know what fruit, is created at the end of this particular quest. And I don't even think it's important. I think how the journey begins, how it unfolds, what it does to you, physically, emotionally, mentally, maybe spiritually, if you have the maturity to have that particular component inside you. But if you're able to get there, and you have adjusted to the outcome, because it's kind of like Plato's cave. You go out because you're looking for the light, and then you realize for the first time, man, I found the light, but it's just way too bright. So you kind of just avert your eyes, or you hold your hand so it doesn't blind you, and little by little you adjust. But once you do adjust, you go back to the place that you have been. You go back to your family. You go back to the classroom, whatever the case may be for the person who's kind of walked this path, And if you get to that place, there is a stage in Sufism, the Naqshbandi order. It's called Khalvat dar Anjuman. Khalvat means seclusion. Anjuman means like a group of people or a gathering. That you could be amongst people, you could be at a party, but you protect that identity inside you. You won't let it be tarnished by anyone. You're not going to laugh at the jokes. You may kind of just grin a little bit. You're not going to laugh. You're not going to participate. But certainly when you come back from this journey like the cave, you have a definite purpose. And your purpose is You kind of look at the people in the cave and you say, listen, I like you guys, but these shadows, these things that you've been seeing and pursuing and desiring, the things you've been addicted to, the things you think that are valuable and worthwhile, they're ridiculous. The only outcome is regret. And this is because you're young and you lack the experience. You open your mouth and you talk to anybody who has ears. You're like Socrates, you're stupid. And then as you mature, as you become a bit more seasoned, you say, okay, I walked the path of dying before being dead. Somehow, miraculously, I survived. Initially, I went back to my environment and I talked to people about dying before you're dead. And I realized, kind of like, Nietzsche's madman. He's a guy who's looking for God. All of us are looking for something, something that is beautiful, that, the cruel hands of time can't reach and destroy. Maybe a book, maybe an audio tape, maybe something that will connect us to that image of perfection, and that's what Nietzsche is looking for. He's intense, he's serious, he has this, intense longing and yearning to be touched by this beauty. He has this, unfortunate experience of just being around idiots, and he has a big mouth. He's not seasoned, the madman. He kind of just says, I'm looking for God. Well, why the hell would you want to, it's like going to, I don't know. It's like going to Washington, talking to Congress people, and saying, I'm looking for someone who's honest here. And you can't remove, the story, separate the story from Nietzsche. Nietzsche is the madman. His problem is he has a big mouth. And so when you go back, when you have tried talking to just people, you kind of say, okay, just because someone says, I have a question, it doesn't mean you should jump on and say, yes, what's your question? And just because they ask the question, it doesn't mean that you, like Amir Sabzavari, should ramble on for 5 hours. Okay? And what you do is you pay attention to the body language, how they look, how they sit, what they talk about. Okay? That tells you how serious you should be with them, or how serious they are. Then you cannot tell them whether or not, or you tell them indirectly perhaps, or maybe you just give them the basic stuff.